Hi all, Rick here. So, you may have noticed that on my channel I tend to shy away from being overly negative on things that I'm not keen on. Sure, a comment or a joke here and there makes its way into my content, but this is why I only did one Doctor Who Series 11 review, stating what I liked, and then the next episode continued exactly none of those trends, so I opted out. Initially, I did not like Star Trek Discovery, but I have to admit that Season 2 showed a lot of intent to change the direction of the show, and each subsequent season improved on the prior. While it retained some issues, I genuinely began to enjoy the show. Likewise, Picard Season 1 started strong in its initial 2 episodes, and then fell off midway, and only just managed to hobble into an adequate ending, resulting in a middling season. And then Season 2 pretty much repeated this arc of promise then loss for me. Season 3 was markedly better, however in hindsight the sheer level of fan service still remains both a source of strength and weakness to the final series. Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds have been mostly nothing but hits for me, since Episode 1 and Prodigy Season 2 was far more interesting than its first. So in a nutshell, this has been my experience with Star Trek since its revival. Section 31, however, trumps the lot, and being the least I have enjoyed a Trek showing, in both new and old Trek series or film. However, it did have 2 redeeming features that I'm going to touch on first. Firstly, its very existence and format. Hear me out. The idea that we could get these extended episodes, self-contained and set in corners of the Star Trek universe, that would be tonally and thematically different from the meat and fare of the standard series is a good idea. It lets creatives explore other aspects of Star Trek that we know are there but seldom see. Failed colony worlds, non-Federation stories, civilian tales beyond Starfleet's reach, even different points in time. Imagine a series set at the fall of the Tukon Empire, or a story of Kalus's quest to rescue his father in times of Klingon mythology, a story on the rise of Surak amid the chaos of the Vulcan civil wars. All promising ideas that this sort of narrative long trek would be suited to address. However, with this being the first outing, I fear that this will never happen now, so I want to add my voice to the mix and reiterate the long trek idea is a solid one. Section 31 was not. The second good thing about this series is how divorced it was from everything Starfleet. For example, we only have a single Starfleet member in the form of Rachel Garrett, and no inclusions of the Federation beside mentions. While many are criticising this as a failing of the show, why use the Trek license if you're not going to use the Trek license? I'm glad for it. Because Section 31's ultimate choice to remain so unclued in on the lost era of Star Trek means that ultimately it impacts very little on the wider Star Trek universe, and I'm content to let it sit there as its own aberration. My attitude to it is basically, so that happened? Anyway. And that reaction was pretty much how the whole long trek left me feeling. Like I'd just seen a dull and predictable action flick with no suspense that could have been any generic sci-fi C that occasionally tried to grasp for concepts inherent to the Star Trek before giving up and floundering in its diluted puddle of the greater universe. I was bored. Usually I try to approach things from a lore angle, looking into what has been added to the canon, but there's scant little here too. I did enjoy Zeph's character. Comedic timing and attitude genuinely got a smile out of me, but we barely got to know much of him beyond being the stereotypical heavy of the group. The same can be said of Mel, who was the femme fatale Delton seductress, and honestly, I appreciated the display of just why Deltons have to swear celibacy on joining Starfleet, as we've already seen the professional aptitude they can bring. However, her ending was brought about rather quickly before she could be developed into anything more. So that's a dead end. Quasi was actually also enjoyable. I liked the expanded look at the chameleoid ability, and he actually features enough to get a greater sense of his personality. Rachel Garrett was certainly here, but really did not need to be Garrett. Beyond the nod to the soon-to-be Enterprise captain, why was she even here? I honestly think the series would have benefited better from not having Starfleet oversight at all, let alone a character who seemed to have no business being there. Her arc of embracing pure chaos seemed sudden, and Georgiou's insistence on Garrett being a chaos goblin seemed nonsensical and incongruous to the captain of the Enterprise C we would later know. As for Alok, I saw him knock Dardano across the room and immediately thought augment. He was fine, I guess. We got hints as to his potential character arc at the very end, with him coming to terms with Georgiou, and although I found his history as an augment intriguing, there was little there for me to really delve into. Now I say potential character arc because it felt like, in all of these cases, there was a lot more created for them that was lost or left out, only for the actors to internalise, instead of making it into the show. I think it shows that this began life as a series. As for Georgiou, she has never been my favourite character, and the consistency at how she escapes repercussions irritates me. And no, working for Section 31 does not count as penance. I guess she's not as outwardly evil as she has been in the past, and is now attempting to keep a low profile, at least. The most poignant part of the episode for me was when she flatly was asked if she regretted making the Godsend in the first place, and she replied with the evasive, "I ordered it destroyed." That's almost a yes, without confronting that. Unfortunately, one of those characters that got the most limelight was Fuzz. It was too much for me. The idea of a minuscule species that for the most part shuns contact with macroorganisms and has been around for millennia is a cool, strange, new addition to the wider lore. But I could never take him seriously. Never once he felt threatening, nor unhinged, just loud. So, was any of this not predictable? A traitor among the group, Fuzz acting strange, and suddenly Zeph, the only guy who could literally be physically manipulated by Fuzz, was suddenly heading off? Of course he's innocent, and of course it's the one character who can pass easily unseen. The reveal that Sun was alive and really the main antagonist was more than obvious. While we have heard mention of this character before, his inclusion seemed to be there only to foreshadow his later appearances. His relation to our protagonist too just felt muddled. His motivation was to take over the Terran Empire and conquer the Federation so he could rule in a kinder way than Georgiou did. But it became a literal decades-long deceit for him to do this, and we never see his descent. We just get one melodramatic scene explaining this, and again not enough time given to exploring his backstory. I imagine, as a series, an entire episode might have taken place covering his path through the Empire as a flashback, just after he was revealed to still be alive. It is a criticism I think I'm going to hear a lot of, that Section 31 felt so compacted and much was lost. But in terms of lore, what's new? Well, I can honestly say that the Terran Universe segments with young Georgiou were good world building. There was this addition that a trial had been conducted to distill an emperor for the Terrans, someone moulded from childhood to be the perfect tyrant to lead them, and it's just the kind of cutthroat solution I can imagine them coming up with in a perverse way to mitigate infighting. The addition of the nanokin species is neat, as is pretty much any non-humanoid species to the wider galaxy. Despite not being able to take him seriously, his actual existence I like. Rachel Garrett has prolonged contact with Section 31. Not a wonderful addition to the lore in my opinion, because this really should be the era where Section 31 is fully disavowed by Starfleet and covered up. By the time Section 31 is presented in Deep Space Nine, it is a sinister, rogue element of the Federation that argues its own necessity, while the heroes of the narrative clearly oppose everything it stands for. 31 would call that being naive, and does raise valid points for their existence, but that's a whole heap and parcel away from being a sanctioned part of Starfleet intelligence. Even Star Trek Discovery presented 31 as clearly the bad guys, and this outfit comes off as anything other than the sinister and Machiavellian schemers that are no better off than the Tau Shiar or Obsidian Order. In fact, it looks to be downright a laugh to be involved in this clandestine murder hobo group, even if it is some form of Suicide Squad. It's a trope I'm already tired of because I frequently see it not being done well. I've seen comparisons to Guardians of the Galaxy, but it worked there because it was at least a story of heroes being made, not bad guys being rewarded for being bad, which is about the only message that this film is trying to deliver. Maybe that's unfair. There is also the notion that a benevolent dictator is a clash of incompatible ideals, which is absolutely true, but we already saw this being addressed in Discovery with the same character, no less. When the trailer first came out, this is pretty much what I expected, even down to them steering well clear of recognisable UFP identifiers. And for that at least, I'm grateful. I also showed the trailer to several non-Trek friends and asked if they'd consider watching it. One replied it looked cringe, and the other said it looked like a generic action thing, but no, they'd not watch it because they're not really into sci-fi. So if the goal was to attract new audiences into Star Trek, anecdotally, they seem to have failed. And if they did, boy, audiences are in for a shock if this is what they then expect Trek to be. This fascination with displaying the darker parts of Star Trek was all the rage a few years ago, and every new series was taking a crack at it, but now I feel we've moved beyond that. Discovery and Picard both eventually removed themselves from dwelling on the grittier side, and Section 31 just felt like it's a product of that era of Trek. Which kinda is. At best, it's a mediocre, brain-off sci-fi romp. But as something with the Star Trek title, the only thing I can hope for is that it does not kill the idea of these long treks overall. They just need to be designed for that format from the start. Well, enough about that, let's just move on from that bump in the road. I don't enjoy making highly critical videos, and honestly this is more or less my thoughts spilled onto the page than a highly analytical breakdown of everything. More of me just putting my feelings onto paper. For some fantastic breakdowns, I would check out Jesse Gender's 15-minute deep dive on the show. But thanks for watching, and let's get back to talking about the lore, and until the next video, I've been disappointed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.